Functions. They're just a set of instructions. Variables are things JavaScript stores to use later, and functions are things we give JavaScript to do. Let's jump right into a simple example because I think that's going to give you a good idea of what a function is. Let's imagine we have an app that has a welcome message when the user logs in. We want the message to say good morning with their name at the end of it. So like good morning Maisha or good morning Devante. It's a customized message with their name in it, so we'll want JavaScript to make the message change based on the user's name. In a JavaScript file, let's create a function. And remember, a function is just the name of some instructions we want JavaScript to do. We're about to create one that we'll ask to make the message for us and then give it back to us so we can show it to the user. To make a function, we can just write the word function and then type whatever we want this function to be called. And since the instructions we're going to give it are just to make my welcome message, let's call it make my message. And at the end, we'll add some parentheses to show it's a function. And finally, to write the actual instructions of what to do, we'll type some squiggly brackets and press enter to open them up. Inside here is where we'll write how to make a message. This part's pretty simple. Let's make a variable to store our message in and set it equal to what we want the message to be. Our message is just text and we wanted it to say good morning Chris, so we can add that in quotation marks as a string. And at this point, we've written everything our function needs to make the message. Now, we just have to tell the function to give it back to us or return it once it's done. And we can do that by just writing return and then whatever we want it to give back to us. So we'll write the name of our variable message in there. Now our function is all done. So we can tell JavaScript to do the thing we wrote out in our function at any time by writing the name of our function with parentheses at the end. And since we told our function to give the finished message back to us once it's done, we'll save the message it gives back to us in a new variable that we can call something like my message. And finally, we'll log it out to the console. I'm not gonna lie, I know we usually would show this in a div on the screen, but I'm trying to keep it simple so we can focus on just functions right now. So just imagine that when we're logging the message to the console, we're actually like selecting it on the page somewhere and putting it in there. All right, that's cool and everything. We see our message on the console, but let's go back over what exactly is happening right quick. So we asked JavaScript to use the make my message function, and it puts our message, good morning Chris, in a variable we make there, and then it returns it back to us. We take the message it gets back to us and save it in a variable to log it out to the console. Nothing too crazy, right? And that's pretty much how functions work. Now there's one more cool thing we can do with this message. Right now, it's always going to say good morning Chris specifically, but what if the user's name isn't Chris? Like if Devante is using this app, it shouldn't be saying good morning Chris, it should be saying good morning Devante. Again, to keep our example simple, let's just pretend the user gives us their name somewhere and we've saved it in a variable called user's name. Right now, we can just make one at the top of the file and set it to Devante. Since we need to include the user's name in the message our function is making for us, we can actually give it the name it should use. We can just put our user's name variable in the parentheses where we use the function. Now where we created the function, we can give this thing we'll be using a name. We can just call it name because it's the user's name. Now we'll just take Chris out of the message and instead add name at the end. And now when we run it, we see good morning Devante. And if we change our user's name variable to another name like Andrea, we see it says good morning Andrea now. And when we give our functions things to use like this, those things we give it to use are called parameters. So to recap, we pretended we got our user's name from somewhere and saved it in a variable, passed the user's name to our function for it to use as a parameter, and then added that name parameter we gave it to the end of our message. And And finally, at the end of it all, we returned the message, saved it in a variable, and showed it to the user. So hopefully that made sense. And if you have any questions about this at all, drop them in the comments because I love learning from your questions. And if you want to support by allowing me the time to think of ways to help others feel less intimidated by tech, check out the Patreon link below. And as always, may the odds be ever in your favor and the snacks be ever in your bag.